Hello, and thank you for joining us for part 4 of our series with Nutanix. Today, we're going to talk about outsmarting the data center mafia. This is the 4th event and final event in our series that we have with Nutanix for this quarter, entitled Taking Control of Your Data Center Destiny. Here, we're going to talk about how we can eliminate true-ups and simplify enterprise licensing agreements, a topic that I'm sure brings joy to all of our hearts. We have a great event today. We're joined by Yannette Capps, who is the Director of Global Commercial Strategy for Nutanix. Yannette, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
My name is Scott Lowe. I'll be moderating today's event. And before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items. First of all, if you have questions, as we always want, we want you to ask them. Please use the Questions tab in your Expo control panel. We want to make sure that we answer all of the questions we possibly can before the end of today's event. And we really do like questions, so we really want to hear from you if you have questions. And today, we want to talk about the prize. For the last 3 parts of the series, we've teased you with this prize. At the end of today's event, we'll be giving away a Microsoft Surface Studio. These are incredible machines. I really, really like them. And we're excited to give one of those away today to people who have attended any segment of this webinar series. And if you are new to the series today, you'll be getting a Tango gift card in the mail after this event. So we're going to talk about the data center mafia and what that really means, and how you may be able to make your life a little bit easier with Nutanix. Yannette, take it away.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, everyone. My name is Yannette Capps, and I have the pleasure of presenting to you today about enterprise license agreements and really breaking them down in the industry. We're going to look at industry standards and what you can expect in enterprise license agreements. There are inherent vendor and customer benefits that we'll review. We'll talk about specifics to consider when reviewing ELA structures in your business, and really what you should consider and questions that you should be asking. Then we'll change gears a little bit and talk about software licensing in general and frameworks that are offered at Nutanix. And then hopefully we'll have time and we'll discuss some options around software consumption and in the future what we can expect to see. So we'll really kick it off. If we look at ELAs in the industry, every vendor has a different way of structuring an ELA. But generally, they break down into 4 main frameworks. You have your all-you-can-eat model, which really allows unlimited access across a full spectrum of products, or maybe a subset of products, for a specified term. And usually this is accompanied by unlimited usage, right? So you have no caps on how much you can use this license or these licenses or the products that you're using for. So you don't have a defined quantity or product set that you have to be committed to. You have a unlimited all-you-can-eat license that you can really use across your whole environment regardless of the workload. Typically, license and support costs are bundled into that price, and it is for a specified term. At the end of that term, then it is expected that you would renew that ELA and really renegotiate either a new contract with what vendors would expect increased growth. The next model that you have is really a true-up model. And with true-up models, you typically have a baseline commitment, something that is expected on day one in terms of a usage basis and what your immediate need is for that software. Then that would be accompanied with a periodic true-up. Some vendors offer a true back where they actually look at your usage that you might have consumed in the past and charge you for that usage. Or other vendors might look at a combination of both, or just look at a true forward model where they would only co-term, that excess usage or over usage to the end of that initial term. The third model that we typically see is around a credit pool. So you can consider this more of a debit card approach where you provide a set amount of funds that then translates into some type of unit of licenses or funds of licenses that could be leveraged through this agreement. And so you would have an overarching pool, which then you would decrement at every software deployment and usage over time. Usually these are also available for a set term and would be defined, but it does allow flexible usage across different products without a commitment to either quantity or the products that you'll be using over time. The credit pool method also allows for very ease of substitution and exchange of licenses, so that if your needs change over time, it might be a beneficial model for you and your company to be able to provide that flexibility in your software licensing over time. The last model really is just an upfront ELA model, where a vendor typically offers, a high discount, low price for an upfront commitment. And typically these are most beneficial for customers in a way where you have predictable software licensing needs. It's not as advantageous when you have unpredictable needs, because you will have a fixed commitment to a product and quantity. And while it might provide the lowest unit economics, it does lock you in and, typically allows for very limited variability in the future. So if we consider customer benefits of ELAs, there's really a lot of, benefits of consolidating that buying power of all of the software licensing needs. And that's why typically customers enter into an ELA discussion. They see an increased need over time. They want to see, a higher maybe purchasing power. So, they would consolidate all of their needs across all of their different workloads or departments, and provide the ability to really centralize that IT licensing and management. So that would minimize customers' overhead. It would hopefully minimize, their price. And in a lot of cases, it gives access to a broadened software portfolio that customers might not necessarily initially want or feel that they need. And really, in a lot of ELA structures, there is the ability to then move licenses freely across different environments. So as long as it is entitled within the ELA structure, customers have the freedom to do whatever they would like with that license. Now, my last point I have here as a lower unit cost. And what I really mean about this is that typically, the expectation is that if you make a large upfront software commitment, you expect to receive the best price, right? Kind of like anything. And where the challenge really lies with that, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later, but it might be a perceived lower unit cost, because it really depends on your actual usage of the license and support to ensure that you're minimizing that unused time. So from a vendor perspective, ELA structures are also very advantageous, because it really locks the customer in upfront. And while you're getting that upfront customer commitment, you are getting a commitment not only to revenue, but hopefully a competitive takeout. It simplifies the sales cycle. In many cases, you have price transparency that's built in or agreed upon discounts. And so it eliminates some of the negotiation cycle that might happen later as customers continue to buy more, which then would also minimize overhead on the vendor side. By giving customers access to a broadened software portfolio, the vendor has the ability to increase their footprint within the full stack. And if with typical three-tier architecture, where the hardware might be more prominent, ELAs are a great structure to lower the hardware TCO for a customer. So if the customer already has the software purchased in an ELA, once that hardware is refreshed every 3 to 5 years, it would lower the overall TCO, let's say in comparison to if the customer were to consider a new platform with new software, they would have to rebuy that software. So now, Scott, I think we're going to open up to the first poll question.
We are shortly. Right now, the slide we have up is the top business drivers. Did you want to? Is that what you just covered?
Yep. So this will be the first poll question.
Okay.
That I have.
Okay, I see. So the poll question we have for the audience is: what are your top business drivers when considering an ELA with a vendor? And you can check all that apply here. I'm not going to read you the options because I'm sure you're all capable of reading. And while we have that up on the screen, we have a couple of questions that have come in from the audience that I think are interesting. One is, can you give us a little bit more insight into how license portability works in an ELA?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really depends on the vendor, but a lot of cases, software is licensed to a hardware platform or a unit or server or a storage array, and that's typically how, I guess not typically, because things are changing very rapidly in the market, and I think we're seeing a lot more software and hardware agnostic companies enter the market and change their models similar to Nutanix. But in kind of the old world, if you will, which is very common still with ELAs, you will see that, software is tied to hardware platforms in a standard buying model. And with an ELA, these vendors provide the structure to their customers to actually port those licenses to different hardware platforms as long as the term of the ELA still exists or is still valid.
Okay, so the next question we have is interesting as well. And the question is, does CapEx versus OpEx make any major changes to the overall ELA discussion that people are going to have with their vendors?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So with the new accounting changes that actually went into effect in January of this year, and I'm not an accountant, I just know enough to be a little dangerous. So with these changes, you actually customers actually have to capitalize any software commitments that are greater than 12 months. So if your ELA structure is greater than a 12-month period, whether you're paying upfront or you're paying over time, if you have, that commitment to make that payment, in a subscription model, for example, then you would actually capitalize that as an asset. Now, it might fall as a different category of where the asset falls. But if it's under 12 months, so if let's say it's 11 months and 15 days, then you actually might be able to, classify that as OpEx. So to answer the question, it really depends on the structure of the ELA and the term and the commitment that is being made on behalf of the customer.
And that also goes for any kind of leasing arrangement too. There have been pretty significant accounting changes.
Exactly.
What has to appear on the balance sheet, whereas capital leases used to appear on the balance sheet, operating leases didn't. Now it's all there. So one of the huge benefits of leasing sort of went away too. With the
exactly the same impact and the kind of the same structure.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So we got a lot of responses to this question. And I don't know if there's any surprises here. For me, there's not. I'm not surprised that people want to see price transparency in an ELA as their top need, and volume pricing as well. Anything here surprise you in that?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was expecting the pricing to rate the highest, as well as license portability.
Okay.
Great.
Listen, we got a comment here that's interesting, and someone on the whole issue of CapEx versus OpEx, especially with the new leasing rules, that it could be, if you really want to move things out of the CapEx column into the OpEx column, it's a good argument for moving to cloud too. So there's some interesting things going on there.
Yeah, so the only point that I would argue there is that it would, if the cloud is usage-based, purely usage-based, if you have a dedicated environment or part of an environment, or you even make a commitment, let's say with AWS for 2 to 3 years, you would still need to put that as a prepayment asset on your balance sheet. So, things that, nothing is obviously black or white in this kind of space, but definitely, I don't think that necessarily going to cloud, if you're going to make a commitment and benefit from the unit economics of making a commitment, then, you could still see on-balance sheet treatment for that.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide, and you can take it away again.
Sounds good. So then, it really comes down to the business drivers, right? And understanding, what is most important to why you would be moving to an ELA structure to help really structure the best framework, for you and your business needs. But as, right now we're going to go through things to consider in each of the different models. and make sure that you're really evaluating the risk that the potential framework that you're pursuing or that you're being positioned by a vendor really meet those business drivers and any inherent risks that could come about of, where that wouldn't meet your business drivers, right? So with an all-you-can-eat model, in my mind, all-you-can-eat models sound great in practice, right? You're getting everything. You can, eat as much as you want. You can use as much as you want for a defined period of time. You have no limitations. But really, every all-you-can-eat model across any vendor is always going to start with evaluating what is your baseline and what is your expected growth. And where do we have opportunity to either, position new products and increase workloads? All of that is taken into consideration when the price of an all-you-can-eat model is established. So there's always going to be growth and deployment assumptions. And so you really have to make sure that when these models are being considered, that you're staying really conservative on maybe the numbers that you're providing, because you don't want to be paying for growth or deployment that you potentially won't use, right? With every ELA model, the risk is shelfware, right? And that still holds true with an all-you-can-eat model, even if you feel that you're getting unlimited usage. The next real big component of that all-you-can-eat model is really what is that renewal cost? Typically, vendors don't disclose what that renewal cost could look like or the assumptions that they might have used to develop your price, because it's always going to come down to a unit price per year or a unit price over the course of that term. And I think it's really important for you as customers to understand what that renewal cost could be, because you don't want to enter into an all-you-can-eat model and then be stuck with a huge renewal bill or a true-up bill at the end, where you deployed this infrastructure or the solution across your whole environment and it's going to be impossible to get it out. The third component to really consider, and this is actually going to hold through across several of the different models, but does an all-you-can-eat model really cause your IT teams to settle for products that may not be best for that specific workload and environment simply because of availability? You don't want to compromise your efficiencies in your infrastructure or even the capabilities simply because a product might be available to you when, something that's going to build, better business drivers might be available in the market. And really the fourth concept is, there's really no such thing as a free product. So even if free products are seeded with an all-you-can-eat model or really any of the models, because they can be, kind of interchanged and mixed, into one standard framework. But there's really no concept as a free lunch, right? So if one product may seem free in one area, then it generally means that the cost of another product in another area might be higher. So when we're looking at a true-up model, it's critical to understand what that overage cost is going to be, right? So if you're making a baseline commitment and then either you have variable usage that sits on top of that baseline commitment, or you have a true-up model where you true up every 3 months or annually, this can take in many different forms. It's important to understand what that overage cost is. And generally, you don't want to be penalized for using more, right? So you want to make sure that the pricing is either consistent between what you're paying as a baseline, or maybe it's even better. And does the company or vendor or ELA that you're reviewing, does it include a true back, or is it just a true forward, or is it both? It's really important to understand that, because you need to understand if vendor is going to charge you for something that you may have used for a short period of time, or if they're only interested in kind of building your commitment over time. Number 3 really talks about rates and kind of goes back to number 1 a little bit. But if you're going to increase your commitment over time, so you make a baseline commitment initially, but if you increase that over time, will your rates improve? As you would think that they would. As you make a higher commitment, you should be able to get a better rate. And then the fourth point is really, in my mind, is one of the most important, as well as understanding what the overage cost is will you have visibility into what that overage might be and where you might have over and under deployments, so that you understand how to manage your workloads and what those requirements will be, and that you won't just be sent a bill based on, some report that's run. You need to have visibility into what those true-ups will be and where they occur. When you commit to a credit pool of either funds or units, one of the basic things to understand is, are you going to use it all? What is that initial commitment that you're making to that pool? And can you start small and then add to it easily over time? Right? I've seen these models be most successful when customers are able to really start small and, add to the pool as their needs increase over time, because the clock usually does start on day one, right, for both the license and support. So it's not that the clock starts over time, as you start using the licenses. It's really everything starts on day one. So being able to add to that easily is great. And then similar to, all you can eat model, in the pool model, it might also draw some concern if your IT teams are settling for non-best of breed products or what might be right for their workloads simply because of availability. In the all upfront model, generally, what I stated earlier was that it's really a fixed product and quantity, and customers generally receive the lowest unit economics in this type of model. The biggest risk for you as a business owner is understanding, if those software needs are going to change over time. And if those workloads are unpredictable, then this might not be the best model for you. If you have very predictable needs and you don't anticipate those needs changing over that term commitment of that ELA, then, that might be the best model for you. But really, it's ideal only for the predictable workloads. So now we're going to switch gears and talk about ELAs at Nutanix and how we offer software licensing. Before I really get into the ELA frameworks and the software frameworks that we might have, it's important to understand how we license at Nutanix. At Nutanix is buying our software license as a life of device with an appliance. So this can be sold with our NX appliance or our OEM appliance through our OEM partners. And in this model, our software is bundled with the hardware as well as the support. What that also means is that the software is actually tied to that hardware frame, so it is not portable. The next model is our new, or not really new, but semi-new, it's been around for about 18 months, is the concept of software only with Nutanix. And what this allows is a fully portable license across any of our supported hardware platforms. So we have what we call an HFCL, a hardware firmware compatibility list. And if that hardware is supported, then our software can be transferred across any of those hardware platforms within the term of the software license. So our software only license is sold on an attribute based on the number of cores and flash terabytes that are in the hardware platform, and it is sold in 1 to 5 year subscription licenses. And the software and support are bundled into that subscription SKU. With software only, you are able to, get Nutanix first level support. So Nutanix does take first call, and then if it is a software issue, then we will mitigate that issue. And then if it's a hardware issue, we will refer you back to your hardware vendor. And then the last model is really our cloud services, which are our off-prem cloud environments that we are building. And so this would offer hosted cloud services and allow customers to manage not only an on-prem Nutanix infrastructure environment, but also an off-prem into our cloud services. And so today we have Xi that's available for disaster recovery, and that's, again, for existing customers with an on-prem Nutanix solution. So the important thing to really note here is that in our software-only model, a la carte, standard, we offer license portability. There is no hardware lock to any, the hardware platform that may be leveraged, and that can be freely moved across different workloads, across different hardware platforms, and is fully scalable and allows you to scale out as your needs change. With the life of device software that's available with the appliance, you can buy it as life of device, and you can also buy it as a term-based license if you'd like. It doesn't have to be life of device. So now, Scott, we're going to move to the next poll question.
We are, and this poll question is: how important is co-terminating your software and support license term? And again, I'll leave the options to you to read. This is always one that's I never liked having licenses that terminate their terms all different times of the year. I want to deal with licensing once and be done with it. So we've had some questions that are coming from the audience that I think are good ones that we can ask while we have this poll question up. The first one is on TrueUp. This is a little worded kind of weird, but TrueUp rate will change with our usage cost. Example, low usage, high rate, and high usage time, low rate. I'm not quite sure what's being asked there, but do you get the gist of it?
So I'm going to guess that the question is more around if a TrueUp model, do rates fluctuate? So if you have low usage, yes, you would receive a higher rate, and if you have high usage, you would receive a lower rate.
Yeah, I think that's the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it really depends. I think it really depends on what that baseline commitment is. And again, if you are considering that type of true-up model with a vendor, I would challenge that the rate should stay consistent because if you make that baseline commitment, then you're already starting somewhere. And if you use anything above and beyond that baseline, then, you should be receiving, at least the same rate, if not a better rate. If it is truly based on consumption and usage, then yes, I do think it would be expected that depending on the usage, you might see a higher rate if you have low usage simply because of the overhead. And then, as your usage increases, you might see a lower rate to really spread that overhead over, the varying usage and the units.
All right, we have another poll question in a couple minutes, so I'm going to hold on the next question until then. Let's take a look at our results here. And, for most people, it's somewhat or extremely important that we have, co-terming ELAs. That's not a surprise at all, actually, to me. I don't know if it is to you, Yannette.
Nope, not a surprise at all. It's interesting. A lot of my conversations that I've been having more recently with customers is that this is becoming less of a concern because I think customers are more concerned about not having shelfware, and they want to maintain, a 3-year license in a 3-year environment if that's what they're signing up for up front. They don't want to have to relicense every year if their kind of needs increase over time. Yeah.
I guess it would make sense as we move into a more SaaS-based world that people are probably adjusting their expectations around what that's going to mean for them work-wise. So I can see where it might not be as important for the emerging age, I guess, is a way to put it.
Yep.
All right. There you go.
Great. So now shifting gears and really looking at and uncovering how we handle purchasing agreements at Nutanix. So we like to maintain our focus on simplicity, and we really don't want to overcomplicate, these structures. So we've taken a lot of industry best practices, and we've created custom and standard framework agreements, referenced as enterprise purchase agreements, because they're not really licensing agreements in our mind. It's really how do you want to purchase your Nutanix software licenses, and what are those commercial terms associated with that? Our licensing and support terms are going to stay standard for the most part. And it's really around the commercial and purchasing terms that, we're talking about. So we like to reference them as EPAs instead of ELAs, not too different. But really in combination of any of these frameworks with our standard portable licensing model in the software-only licensing method, we really want to try to keep these agreements fairly short and simple. They attach to our standard EULA, and they might add, a page or two of extra language, especially in the standard frameworks. the custom frameworks, it all kind of depends. But legally, we really try to keep them simple. So from a standard EPA framework standpoint, we really have two standard models. And the first one being around volume pricing and providing a rate card. So, with maybe an initial small investment in Nutanix, we would establish a VPA. And what that basically allows is a commitment to a price decrease over time. And it reflects our investment in our customers, I would say, at a high level. It's nothing overly complicated or new. It's our standard rate card. And really, we don't really require any other than an upfront commitment from our customer for an upfront purchase. There's no incremental commitment over time. If the customer continues to use our products and, continues to grow their investment with Nutanix, the VPA is a way of us also, meeting that investment and showing customers a cost benefit over time. The second framework that we have is our coins program. So really this is our credit pool model, if you will, and it allows a bucket of coins that you would purchase upfront, and it allows you to flex the products and quantities over time, a licensing portal that allows you to basically license very easily. So you can check licenses in, check licenses out. When you check licenses out, then your credit pool or your coins pool decrements. And then if you check them back in, then it increases. And we really only allow a true forward model in this approach, and that's also something that the customer can choose. They don't have to opt into the true forward model, but the true forward model really allows overconsumption and allows our customers to consume more coins than they might have. And then, after a few months, if we see that that customer has been using additional coins and, consistently growing that coins pool, then we'll go back to the customer and really work with them to understand what their needs are and if they need to increase their coins pool going forward. But we would never go back on our customers and say, okay, well, you've used, 100 extra coins in the last 3 months. Now you owe us X amount of dollars. It's really just not the way that we work. In our custom EPA frameworks, these are very much customized, and we really work with customers to understand what those business drivers are. They're not, standard frameworks, because we really don't believe that, the same model is going to look the same for everybody, right? I mean, even in the last two poll questions that we had, customers have different business drivers. Some customers, care about co-terming where others do not. So really understanding each component of your accounting, your procurement, your licensing, your centralized IT procurement needs, understanding each area of these components will ultimately help us, make a custom EPA framework. But, they can include customized license deployment schedule. So some customers that don't care about co-terming licenses might want to, have licenses that are transacted to them on a, 6-month basis, where we add, 6 licenses or 10 licenses every, 6 to 10 months or whatever it may be. Offering variable software consumption, so having customers commit to a baseline, but then enabling excess usage so that they're able to scale up easily if they have procurement challenges and they need to be able to spin up quickly. If the coins model doesn't work for customers, we have other frameworks that allow for substitution and exchange of licenses. And then as we are transitioning to these different licensing models, from life of device on an appliance to software only to now cloud services, there is a conversion process that is happening with some of our customers that might have been on an appliance life of device license that now want to move to software only. So we also build those transitions into our custom EPA frameworks. So now I think we have our last full question. Mm-hmm.
We do. I'm going to launch it. And so what term do you typically buy software or would like to buy software? So take a look at that and answer if you would. It helps us understand our audience. And we've got some really good questions from the audience here, Yunette. First of all, let me take one here that was quite good. It was, How do items such as infrastructure throttling fit into a standard agreement in this case? Throttling meaning turning up more data center architecture only when I'm dealing with heavy usage time. So basically like burst capacity.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So this plays into kind of the variable software consumption. And what a lot of vendors are doing is that they're offering these models where you would have some type of baseline commitment that you know is dedicated, and then you would have access to licensing above and beyond that for bursting. What you typically, and what's very rare to see, is actually the ability to then be able to scale down. So typically you can scale down on a usage basis, like actually on a month-by-month basis. But what's more common is that you would see that you would have to scale up for like a 6-month or a 1-year term. And then after that 6 months or 1 year, you could then scale down that commitment.
And we'll save the rest for right after after the rest of the presentation. I think we're just about done. So let's take a look at the
one more slide.
Was here. And so what people want to buy annually, that's not a surprise. 3 to 5 years up front for some, because I assume that there's probably some economies of scale to be had there.
Yeah, but that's actually surprising, to me at least. I typically see, customers that want to buy more than 3 to 5 years, but I'm glad that's moving on a more annual front. Because generally what we've seen is that, the price isn't that different, whether you're making an annual commitment or a 3-year commitment.
I had when I was working in higher ed, we actually had an ERP vendor that would basically, if you agreed to a 5-year commitment and paid up front, that was the key. But they would include a 10% discount and lock you in at the current year. So you wouldn't actually have to pay the 8% normal increase. And so it was a really good deal to do a 5-year upfront with them, because you could save 35% on the licensing fees. So I can definitely see where those longer commitments could be pretty valuable.
Yeah, but it's interesting, the market is changing, right? And I think with some of the revenue recognition changes, and again, it all depends on now the vendors, business drivers, do they need cash up front? Do they want to be able to recognize revenue up front? Now with the accounting changes, if you get a customer commitment up front, you don't necessarily have to get the cash up front to be able to recognize the revenue up front.
Right.
So, all sorts of shifting dynamics in the market right now. And, I think everybody's trying to figure out, what's most beneficial for them.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to hit next and let you finish your next slide.
Okay, so really, and I'm going to wrap this up quickly because I do want to leave plenty of time for Q&A, but, just really kind of just conceptual, not saying that this is something that Nutanix is necessarily supporting, but really just as we're looking at software consumption in the future and the products and the features and the exponential growth that everybody's experiencing, it makes sense that really limiting that unused license and support is going to become an increasing priority across the board, right? And so whether you are, in today's model, you might have these staggered deployments, which I have depicted here in green, where you're buying software up front, but your usage and over time, you might have a lot of unused license and support that you may have, right? And that's ultimately it's going to come down to, as this exponentially grows, dollars that are being wasted. And it really comes back to, that bursting, that having software on demand, the consumption metrics. But I think, as we look 5, maybe 10 years down the line, we're going to get to a point where, customers are going to want to consume features, be able to scale those features on and off very easily, and pay by the usage of those features with, transparent usage from a license portal perspective, from, a license enablement perspective, and really, provide that single pane of glass of, where am I using what and how much is that costing me? Not necessarily, trying to buy in a centralized procurement method where you're buying a bunch of licenses to get the best unit economics, but you're really managing your licenses to understand what the cost is across all the different workloads. And so just something to think about. I think, we're in a position of change in the industry right now. And certainly with our cloud services here at Nutanix, we're taking this, consumption approach, allowing that usage to be, or that consumption to be based on usage. But I think we're going to see more and more of that, as we continue to progress through the market and as, the licensing needs across the board increase. It's, just makes the most sense to really minimize that unused license and the support that, a lot of people are currently paying for. But it's like anything, right? We want to work smarter, not harder, and improve our efficiency. So just from a kind of software licensing and a software consumption standpoint, this is what I'll leave you with. So now, Scott, do we want to open it up for more questions?
We do. We've got a number of really good questions that I think that we can go through here. First of all, do any of the Nutanix licensing models conflict with licensing models of other major software applications that we might use in such a way that it would, make the vendor models more difficult to take the best advantage of? And so basically, is there anything in the Nutanix licensing that might conflict with a software license?
With another software license?
Yeah, I guess I could think of an example like it used to be a long time ago that you weren't allowed to run things in a virtualized environment, and so licensing would prevent that. I think that's what this person's getting at. Is there anything you can think of today that would be a conflict between Nutanix's licensing and other licensing in the environment?
I can't say from a technical standpoint. I can't say. I'm just not technical enough. But I would say, just, knowing exactly where we fall within our technology compared to other vendors. But I would say from a commercial standpoint, I don't think so, right? Because we do offer a life of device, hardware-centric model in our appliance-based software licensing. And then we offer a subscription-based licensing in our software-only model. And then, now we're expanding to our cloud portfolio, which, we'll be able to offer more in the future. So you really kind of have all these different options from a commercial standpoint of purchasing Nutanix software. But from a technical standpoint, I really couldn't answer that. But I'm happy to, take that question and bring it back to my engineers and product management teams to, dive deeper if that was the intent of the question.
And just for the audience to understand, we'll be focusing the questions primarily on things that have to do with licensing. If there's other Nutanix feature information you're interested in, please follow up Nutanix separately. There's a couple of questions here like that. So the next question is there any point in the near future where Nutanix may go to a feature-enabled licensing model? I guess I'm not quite sure what that means, but I guess that maybe there's, the base license has X, and if you want to enable the feature, then you pay Y. I don't know.
Yeah, so we already in our software only, so our Acropolis, our AOS operating system model, we do have different levels of functionality. So we have our starter license, we have a pro license, and then we have our ultimate license. And between each license, you can add on different functionalities to upgrade, just a part of the next, kind of upgrade path, if you will. So there are different features, but it won't be based just on a single feature or a set of features, right? It will be a bundle of features in each of those three buckets that you can then, upgrade pretty seamlessly to the next.
Do any of Nutanix's capacity forecasted and modeling capabilities integrate with any of the licensing tools that are available right now?
So I think the question is around, so we have a portal, so our Pulse portal, which enables really capacity reporting across the board, across your environment. But unfortunately, as of right now, it is more based on the usage of the hardware or the appliance overall, if you will, the NX appliance. But yes, the idea is that licensing would also be integrated into that Pulse reporting. It's just it's going to take some engineering work to get us there.
Okay, let's address the question. I'm just looking at the rest of the questions to see what else we have here. Yeah, one of the questions is, does Nutanix have partners in Illinois absolutely. I assume they can just go to Nutanix.com to find a partner.
Yep.
Is that correct? Okay. Somebody mentioned there's still software that doesn't work in a VM world. I've seen it. I hate it. I don't understand it. I experienced that recently myself. I was very, very disappointed that it's 2000, at that point 18, and there was software that still didn't support virtual machines. So one of the questions here is, it seems that everyone is moving to a full subscription licensing model and away from other models. I mean, the question is, do you see that happening? And I think from what we just heard today, the answer is a resounding yes, correct?
Absolutely, because it's all about reoccurring revenue and building up that repeatable revenue stream. And that's really why, the subscription, it's, customers are rebuying, their software after that initial term, or they're going to shorter terms, right? From our poll questions, over 50% of you want to be buying software on an annual basis. So it's all about that predictable reoccurring revenue and building that out to really achieve, that growth that everybody's expecting on Wall Street.
And to the person who wants to know if there's partners in Minneapolis, I'm sure there are. Please go to Nutanix.com to learn more about that. Yonette, that is the end of our questions. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Absolutely. Thank you all for listening. I hope it was good use of everyone's time.
It was excellent. And, it's always interesting. Sometimes, at first it's like, oh, it's a licensing webinar. And it doesn't sound like it's super exciting, but it actually really was. So I'm really excited that people found so much value in it. We have one more exciting thing to do, though, and that's to give away a Microsoft Surface Studio. We, for the last 4 weeks, have been teasing this, and we actually have a winner. And I'm going to hang up. No, I'm kidding. Our winner today, I'm just going to look to make sure I get the right name here. We'll be reaching out to you after the event. If you would rather make a donation to a charity for the value of the prize, if you're not able to accept this gift, we're happy to do that instead. Our winner is from California, and his name is Sang Bai. We'll be reaching out to you immediately after this event. To our audience, thank you very much for joining us for what turned out to be a very successful series. And we capped it off with something that's really important, but sometimes seems like a chore, but it seems like it's becoming less of a chore thanks to some of the things that companies like Nutanix are doing. Yonette, thank you again for this great presentation. Thank you, Nutanix, for sponsoring this series. And everyone have a great rest of your day.